which I still wouldn't do. It's what,
We're 1/4 meet.
I turned on the
Personally,
recording.
Lake Griffey is twice a month. Lake Griffey is twice a month.
Also 1/4, my husband and then.
Do we wanna go ahead and get started on the ORC agenda? No, I got.
absolutely, yeah. Is it just,
Bernie said he was going to be able to attend, and then Julie is going to attend virtually, so here's Bernie.
I guess that was my question.
Julie will be logging on virtually.
With a board of 4, do we actually need 3 people here for?
50%, so you
it's
have
50.
2.
Okay.
Okay, hi Bernie.
So we can go ahead and call to order the ordinance review committee. We do have an in-person quorum. We have Margaret Clements, Bernie Garitas, Sean Enright Randolph, and then we're expecting Julie Thomas to join us virtually when she's able. We've got a pretty full agenda, so I'll go ahead and start out with the first item under topics for discussion under new business, which is the chapter 858 subdivision assurances for completion and maintenance of improvements. So we have quite a bit of information in here under some of the comments. And then we also have track changes. So the items that are strike through are current text in the current ordinance. And then the red and the blue are all added text that we're proposing. So would it be easier to start out with some big picture questions to the ORC about some of the changes, or would you like me to just start from the top and go towards the bottom?
Well, I'd like you to give the big picture changes
Mhm.
and then your assessment of how this addresses kind of our above 40% non-completion rate.
Sure.
Okay.
So big picture, the impetus for this text amendment is because we have developments that are not being finished and they're being continually renewed. And they're being renewed at a rate that is the same as when the project was originally estimated.
Yes.
And there's a statement in this ordinance that says that prior to expiration, they're supposed to notify planning staff 4 months in advance that they intend on renewing, get permission, or release, or reduce. They're not doing that.
Okay.
We're getting information that they plan on renewing the minute that the letter of credit is expiring. And so they do a quick switch of here's the new letter of credit.
Mhm.
And so then we're left with a situation where they keep renewing even though it's not in tandem with what the ordinance is stating. Because the incentive is that if we didn't accept their letter of credit at this point, now it's under the amount that what it would take to finish the improvements. And also it's not technically the developer walking away. And so by having them renew, at least it's telling us that they're not intending on walking away.
Yes.
But they're not following the rules of renewing, giving us any time to react. It's just sort of like the day, the minute. And they're hoping we forget actually, because if we don't cash the letter of credit, then they can just be free and clear of anything
Yeah,
besides the performance bond
Yeah. That puts too
agreement,
much
things like
on
that,
you.
but.
It puts too much on you.
So the burden is on staff at this point, so we're trying to shift the burden to be more on the developer. Make it more in line with if you're renewing, keep up with the cost of inflation. And also, you know, if you're going to be posting a letter of credit, maybe we shouldn't be doing. Maybe we should only be doing cashier's checks and not letters of credit, which is more costly towards the developer, but maybe could incentivize further completion of subdivision improvements before they go to post that performance guarantee. Because right now, under the state code, if they give us a letter of credit or a cashier's check under a current ordinance and it's a grassy field, we cannot withhold a permit for any building permit or tell them they have to do some sort of completion before they start pulling permits. So they could bond or submit a performance guarantee for the entire project, 0 to 100. and get a building permit for one house, build a road to that one house, never finish anything else, that house could be occupied and utilized with the rest of the subdivision never finished.
We could sell lots.
They could sell lots, the roads will never be connected, there could be issues of detention not being completed fully because, you know, if they walk away, we're just trying to do some due diligence of keeping updated with what's been happening on the ground and what we'd like to see change. What are you saying?
I think your suggestions are good here.
Yes, to that, and back to your first question is. I don't know how much of a deep dive we need to go into it all, but this has pretty significant ramifications, and. I think if you were able to kind of go through it, step by step would be nice, and I'm sure there's some that we can kind of get through quickly and some that may bring up a important discussion, so we.
Okay.
You know, are all on the same page, and to Margaret's point, like. Really what your thoughts are of how this is going to kind of, get us where we need to be, so we're not experiencing, you know, these, issues with having to cash in. And build them out ourselves, or the fact that those improvement and public benefit things go away due to, you know. Prior administrations or whatnot.
Okay. I already did, yes. I already asked. So. One question that we had for legal at the beginning is if the developer does not. If the developer, so there's two options at the beginning of this. They do a subdivision, a major subdivision, let's say, that goes to the plan commission. Before they final plat, which is the Mylar that gets signed at the back. When the plan commission president comes in, we sign that Mylar, that's when it becomes a recorded document, and that's called the final platting. So between that plan commission preliminary plat approval and the final plat approval, the developer can pull a grading permit and a subdivision improvement agreement to put in those, to put in some level of installation of infrastructure that needs to happen so that they can reduce the financial guarantee. If they decide to not post that, or to not put in any work and just post the final plat and submit a financial guarantee for 100% of the work, and then they walk away, does the county have to build out that subdivision? Or, okay, so the county's only responsible for finishing out subdivisions that are partially begun.
Well, we're not responsible for doing any subdivision, right? So if they walk away after one lot, that's on them. We'll return the, if they wanna take action to get that vacated or whatever, we can return the money.
Okay.
But, or,
Is that something that we need to have in writing in here as to what the county's obligation is for? When developers walk away?
Because, you know, even though we may not be obliged, we feel the pressure because the homeowners call and we're the government and they expect us to help.
Quite to the home occupant stage, right?
Well, we have cases right now.
No, I know.
So I'm just mentioning that.
Yeah,
What Jackie's saying.
well, I'm,
What Jackie's saying is if it's final plat, this desk has nothing on it, it's final plat. They can sell lots, so everybody at this table can buy lot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The performance bond's put down, so there's a surety in place. And all these lots are sold. 5 years passes, 2 years passes. The performance bond isn't cashed in, it goes to the wayside. And all of a sudden, all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all 6 of us say, hey, we got a vested interest in this property, we've got a lot, we wanna start all building permits, blah, 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 where are my roads? Jackie's question today is the county responsible? Whether it's 10% completion, 90%'s done, or 100% completion, 0%'s done, where's that tipping point? Is that a fair statement?
It's
Yeah.
worded much better than I did.
No, not at all. I just wanna make sure I understand.
Don't worry, I could try to reword it in my words and they'll make everyone seem way more intelligent. Margaret, that's my whole goal here is to learn, so I wasn't trying to distinguish the two, I was just trying to make sure I was following along in good detail.
Okay,
Because we do
thanks.
have those
Great.
ongoing
okay,
issues, and I
Thank you.
guess my real question is, to Bernie's point, if the lots are sold and that infrastructure is not being put in place, and the bond's not adequate to build out the roads and stuff, what happens to the property owners at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we can have it in our ordinance that we can turn that money over to an HOA. So that they could deal with it, but the county has no responsibility to complete somebody's private development. And if somebody buys a lot, as harsh as it sounds, that's on the developer. That's a private transaction that the county is not involved in.
and this was my statement, nevertheless, they're calling us and they expect and hope that we will remediate the situation because it is their property and their treasure, so.
I understand.
Yeah,
It's their property and their treasure. And all we're saying is it's gonna be a county maintained road. It's gonna have this much subgrade, this much asphalt, this much surface, storm sewer on the sides. They're gonna build it to our standards. And then once it's built to our standards and it performs what it's supposed to do after a certain period of time and holds up, then we will maintain it. Which I think is what you're doing. It's not our job to make sure the road is put in place. The surety is just there. If he walks away, that there's money there to put something in to make him get back and forth,
Yeah,
to help the homeowner. So
yeah,
I
the
guess-
county, if there's enough money there and the county's willing to undertake that, they can, but they don't have to.
So, yeah, I guess that goes back to like the question Jackie was asking, I guess. Did you get a good, clear answer on that? Because I'm hearing two things. We're not obligated, but we are looking to help remedy the situation to protect the interests of the people that have invested in Monroe County. And, I understand we're not obligated, but are we looking to put in measures where we do have a way to help provide to build out that infrastructure, so then people can build on that lot? Or are we getting into a discussion area that we're not really focused on? And that's what I'm trying to distinguish right now, because there's what we can do and what we're obligated to do, or what type of measures we could put into place to help mitigate and take more of a obligation on some of this
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, the purpose of Jackie's question was to provide clarity
Right,
on what's gonna happen, whatever that is. So it may be, homeowners, you're out of luck, or it may be whatever policy the county decides to undertake.
well, I just, as a responsible board and a responsible planning office and a responsible legal department, we have to recognize that there's a problem with 40% non-completion. And so if we can mitigate that non-completion by further regulation, as much as we hate to do it. But it seems as though it's required in this instance because, we have, builders who aren't doing their job.
Yeah.
but
So,
then that puts on more of an undertaking, right? Because we're talking about a project manager type responsibility, because we can't just put these extra burdens on planning, right? We're talking about needing more of a dollar amount from what these improvement bonds are, performance bonds. That gets into a whole different
I
type of
understand.
discussion.
I
And
understand.
I'm just following along, and I'm not sure exactly what our hopes. I agree with you that we should take a position in this and do what we can to help protect, the constituents of Monroe County, or the people that live here. But I don't even know how to begin to
I
address
think
it.
our job is more not to protect the interest of the homeowner, and there's areas of gray in the state, okay? Our job is to
Protect
protect,
the interest or the process. guess.
Our job is to protect and make sure the infrastructure that's constructed is done in a manner that meets county standards and will not fail readily. That's our responsibility. It's not to make sure that the family can hold hands, swinging hands down the street, walking the sidewalk, and making sure that they're gonna be able to walk down that sidewalk. It's to make sure that the infrastructure is built properly, and then if there are issues with the way it was constructed, if there's money set aside for failed infrastructure, if there's a pool to go to be able to make it. It's not to ensure that everybody's dream of home ownership is gonna be exactly the way they want it.
Is there a way to like
That's a
put in that selling off the lots and making sure there are some type of development occurring prior to selling off the lots? I mean, I think that's really where that situation is a bunch of people come and buy
I think,
property expecting something to happen and that doesn't happen.
yeah, the only thing we can require before they start selling lots is the installation of, infrastructure that is part of the county system. In other words, if they have to install a passing blister, we can make sure that they do that up front. If they have to install a stormwater facility, we can make sure that they do that up front, but otherwise, they don't need to.
Well, that puts more skin in the game and more dollars out of the investor or out of the developer's pocket, which hopefully would get them to move to strive for completion. I guess I'm just thinking kind of in lines with Margaret's comments and then what the county really can obligate themselves to do. And I'm gonna pause for a minute because I'm really curious what Julie has to say on this conversation since she's been able to join us. And then I'm really curious if we're staying on track of what planning wants us to discuss.
Can you all hear me? So
Yes.
I would say that indeed our obligation is related only to county infrastructure and what's going to impact other property owners vis-a-vis stormwater retention. You know, there are bad actors all throughout society, and we cannot afford to, as much as we might want to, we can't afford to build out subdivisions that are incomplete. Our concern has to be on what the county relies on and not on what the individual homeowner was promised by a developer. And if they have to take that developer to court, they should. But if we start getting into that, we need to talk to council because that's going to be a whole heck of a lot of money out of the county budget.
Yeah, that's where my thoughts were falling, is if it's even feasible.
So I think that, we're having a good discussion that falls in line with some of the items that we put in the ordinance. So we did say that the performance bond and financial guarantee shall encompass all improvements that may be dedicated to the public or specifically required by ordinance. And we put in, for example, roadways, street trees, sidewalks, stormwater infrastructure, trails, etc. This etc. is to cover things like if there was a conditional approval for a passing blister or some other item that maybe isn't always included in subdivision requirements. So I think that's.
Written commitments almost.
Those are written commitments typically. We did have a discussion last time about the inflation calculation and we've made that, I think, a little bit clear. We wanted to break out what would be taken as part of the maintenance bond and then what the project estimate change would be for 10% for each year. So we put together this table that would include what year their project goes until, and then how much, in this example, they would be asked to post as part of that project performance period. And this is something we'd want to put right in the ordinance.
One question I had above that table,
Mhm.
excuse me. which is- So, on that last section,
This one, or the one here?
Yeah, now there for 1, 2, and 3,
Yes.
you struck those out. My question is, the way I saw those, that still encompasses, for lack of a better word, a power or authority that the county still maintains by allowing those other 3 options. Is there a reason, you see what is there a reason why we
Strike
took
that.
those out, or does that just give us flexibility to make decisions, or do we just not wanna have that flexibility?
Well, and that is a question I think we started to go down last month, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, but we cannot take into account private utility infrastructure in our performance guarantee. So I felt like it was a little bit confusing to say we could reduce the amount in the financial guarantee if they have commitments to put in utilities. But I also see the point of, you wouldn't wanna live in a subdivision without water and electric and. other
I agree
utilities.
with what's up, I was just wanted to ask a quick question, because it was on my notes, so thanks.
So we have no ability to govern that, I guess. So you're just.
Utilities are all not, utilities would not be included in the financial guarantee, whatever they are able to.
But there's still some redundancy in our other ordinance to make sure that they have the letters of capacity to serve, right? So.
I still think that's important to prove that you would have utilities, but I don't think it's necessarily something that the county would be obligated. So whatever you take in as a financial guarantee, my understanding is at any point we could call that money, and those items are itemized.
Mhm.
So if we have an itemized line item that says electric utility Duke, $65,000, and the developer walks away, the question becomes, would the county be obligated, because it's in that financial guarantee, to put in that Duke Energy electrical line to that subdivision? I think our understanding is we cannot be putting in private utilities to, yeah. That wouldn't be something, the county will never take over maintenance responsibility for utilities.
I guess, would we want to refer to, having those, like a complete submittal of, being able to provide utilities?
Maybe elsewhere, I don't know if it
Needs to be in here.
needs to be in this chapter, but I do agree it still
Well,
needs
you
to
wouldn't
be.
do an occupancy permit if you didn't have sewer or didn't have water connected to your house.
Right, there's still checks and balances.
So there would be, so a person would be prevented from occupying a dwelling, residential, commercial, I guess, if electricity or water or sewer wasn't hooked to it. Because the building, or because we wouldn't give them an occupancy permit, correct?
I think that would be fair to assume, although I don't know, like if it's on a septic system. I know the building department's checking to make sure that connection is there from the home, but after it leaves the home and enters into the ground, my understanding is maybe, again, I don't think that this is a situation that occurs often, but we just want to make sure that we're clear in our communication.
And these, going back to your table, then the fee escalation per year, those are numbers that staff reviewed with the highway department to vet out that they made sense.
We have it in here to either say 10% flat, or that they have an opportunity to give us an updated estimate. So the approved price estimate must include 10% for each year requested by the subdivider for the performance period, e.g. if the performance period is to take 4 years to complete. That's probably not, we didn't complete that sentence, but the amended performance bond amount shall include up-to-date unit price estimates submitted by the petitioner's engineer based on the higher of latest NDOT pricing or local bid history where applicable. If a new estimate is not provided at least 30 days prior to performance bond expiration, subdivider shall include an additional 10% increase for every year the guarantee is renewed. So maybe we could amend this language a bit more to be clear, but I know that that was something that you would express interest in, and that we would wanna give them an option of doing an estimate. This would, in my mind, would only be for renewals. Because if you're saying, my project's gonna take 5 years, obviously, we wouldn't have latest NDOT pricing for that far out, so they would have to just build in the 10% per year.
But I think you've given the developer an opportunity for a one-time reduction in that 5 years, correct?
Well,
Did I understand that right?
yes, one-time reduction if after 50% of the improvements have been installed, that's still a requirement.
So if they went through 2 years and had 60% done,
Yes,
then they would have the 60% would already be not, or then they could come in and ask, they could prove that they had 50% done, and then they could come in and say, this is my estimate. And they could get a real number estimate that the 10%, if it was overestimated, they could get back to reality with the way this is written. Does that make sense what I'm suggesting?
well, let's say, if they were to say, my project is $100,000 and I want it to go for 5 years, let's say. So let's say they're at for sake of clarity, 150,000 mark, so they'd have to post 165,000. If, in your example, at year 2, they're 60% done, I don't know that it's clear right now whether we would reduce this amount.
I would not be in favor of that. That's when they walk away and don't finish.
Or if you're saying, Bernie, that you would look at this amount to reduce, I think we would reduce the amount posted. So that's where I think it gets a little bit tricky, is that we have to, maybe we need a third column of like project estimate, inflation is 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. Do you see what I mean? Like that number cannot be, the 50,000 number cannot be reduced. The 15,000 cannot be reduced. So then you're left with 100,000 that is subject for reduction.
I would not be in favor of reducing it as the project progresses. If they're and you know, we need the money at the end when they majorly walk away, and there's a strong probability that they'll walk away 40%. So we need the money in our account so we can pay for the completion of the project.
So you would be in favor of changing it to not allow reductions?
Not allowed, the job.
Well, we have to allow reductions by statute.
Okay.
Okay.
We have to allow that. And one thing we should think about too is when you're saying 50% completed or whatever, 50% of what? The cost, the area, what, I don't know.
The original estimate usually.
The infrastructure.
The detailed estimate of how much sidewalks, how much road
Yeah.
detention.
Wouldn't it have to be 50% of the parts that we are concerned about? Not,
That's,
no, not 50% of the houses being done, but 50% of the roadway, 50%, yeah.
can it be that way
Yeah,
legally? Okay, well, that's.
yeah, we don't look
Yeah,
at
I
the
mean,
houses at all.
Yeah, it wouldn't be
We
houses,
would
but I
never-
mean, are you saying that 50%,
Of the
are
infrastructure,
you talking about like, what if they put the roads down?
the roads and bioretention.
Yeah, but
But-
it doesn't, I mean, the bulk of the cost is something else. What,
Yeah.
what is it
That's right.
50%
Oh,
of
50.
the amount?
Of the cost of the actual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
The actual build.
Do
That makes
these,
a lot of sense.
do these things have to be written in such a way so that you could say, you know, X amount of dollars for the blister on the roadway, X amount of dollars for sidewalk, X amount of dollars for roadway, X amount of dollars for trail, X amount of dollars for the stormwater retention. And then if they get 50% of stormwater retention done, they don't take 50% off of everything. They only get 50% back on the stormwater side. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I guess the administrating of that is
Right.
where my question
yeah,
falls.
I don't think we have to give them a reduction at every construction stage.
Right,
I think you only have to do at least one reduction. So,
But how do we know, Dave, that that reduction is for the right thing? In other words, they could say, well, I got all the roads done, but they haven't done anything else that's on the list. I would not feel comfortable giving them 50% back of their bond because there's, 80% of the other things haven't been done.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on, I mean, it would, if reducing the bond by 50% was enough to cover completion of the other 80%, then that would be
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
We're currently bringing to the plan commission reductions. I think there's maybe another one coming up, or is that a full release? That might be a full release. But usually the highway department has reviewed all the improvements that have been made. They look at the original estimates that are itemized line by line for all the different improvements. And the highway department kind of can dictate whether they have met, what they're asking for with that. But with the inflation calculation in there, I agree with Jackie that it's possible we might need another column in there to calculate out what are we using only the original estimate, and that's what we can release the 50% on, or do we use the inflated price at year 3, and that's what
I'd use the inflated price at year 3, and if it's itemized and they completed certain things like, or halfway completed certain things like roads, and not the detention and retention ponds, then you only factor in 50% of the road completion, not the higher ticket items.
I mean, if it's already itemized, it already seems like a less of a administrative task to manage, but I guess who has the discretion here to determine if it's 50%?
well, we usually submit what as-built and itemized estimates and whatnot that they've supplied to us that the highway department has reviewed. Highway department will check off on it. We bring it to the plan commission. So ultimately you all are signing off on the reduction. That's what we've been doing lately,
what I thought.
bringing it to you all.
Yeah,
And I'm trying to pretend like I know nothing, just it helps me.
yeah.
I had a couple.
Go ahead,
I
no,
don't
go
want-
ahead, Charles.
And this might take us back, but just for my own clarification, so. We're doing the fixed 10% or NDOT pricing, and I'm kind of curious. Why we have the 2 versus if there's a way to look at what the current pricing is and stick with that, because imagine if it's a increase by 20% that year. I guess higher of the latest NDOT pricing, but it doesn't say that they're getting that pricing, right? It's like either or. And I'm really curious why we wouldn't just stick with the NDOT pricing, since they're kind of in the business of providing those numbers, and then that means if it's a 10% increase or a lower increase or even higher, then we're just using one point of reference. Does that make sense per year?
When we talked with the highway department, they said that for their federal grant applications, they have been told to just assume a 10% increase year to year. So we've used that as a backdrop if they do not get us an updated estimate. The either or is really if they're wanting to submit to us either NDOT pricing or local bid history in advance, they can do that to be competitive, but staff, I think, especially if we have a 5-year performance period, we don't have that NDOT pricing for 5 years from now. It comes out year to year.
Yeah.
Right, but they have to come back for the renewal, so that's my
But at the
question.
outset, they could say, my project in 2023 is approved, it will be done in 2028. Here's my financial guarantee today. And so we don't have 2028 NDOT pricing. So it's only good for renewals at the time that
So
it
that's
expires.
something that I'm not following. So if we go back up to the Excel thing real quick, what you're saying is if someone comes in and says it's a 5-year project, we're upfront asking for the 165.
Yes.
So they're not essentially coming back year in
Yeah.
to
Correct.
the increase, we're just assuming that the timeline they gave us is correct, and we're just throwing in that pricing.
But if they actually need a
Which then makes
6 year,
my question, yeah, okay.
then
so
they can choose between the extra 10% or NDOT pricing
Then my
here.
question would be, why wouldn't we just stay fixed with a 10%? Versus that, because then again, I feel like
Yeah,
inflation could change on a dime, right? And, we get someone coming in 2023 and it's a 5-year plan, and in 2024, NDOT's pricing has just significantly went up
sure.
or went down or something.
Okay, so your
But
point would
then-
be to get rid of, just make it one or the other,
It seems
10%.
like, first come, first served type privilege here, because if you can come in at the beginning when NDOT has a low pricing and set it out for 6 years, you're kind of fixed in that lower pricing. And the next year, they double their pricing, and then that following person comes in the next year and they're looking at investing twice as much. I don't know, if what you're saying, the 10% is here because of, discussion highway has had with NDOT, that this is a good measure to have in place. Obviously, everyone's gonna probably go with the lower dollar amount anyway, so if they do get a observant pricing for NDOT, they'll probably just want to do the 10%, but I'm still trying to figure out why we have.
Well, I mean, it's an industry standard. I mean, it's just like the Department of State, cost of living figures across the country. NDOT figures across the country, they're an industry standard, I would assume, and that makes it easier for us to administer and other people to access the tables, to put it into their grant proposals, their costing estimates, et cetera. And if we start changing and gaming out the different factors that people can use to change the prices, it just makes it more complicated for everybody.
Well, that's what I'm saying, we have a way to kind of pick and choose different options of how to do it, so.
Right, but
My question is just very simple, that, first, I don't know if I'm asking the question clearly enough, because I felt like that exchange should really go to what my question was, is if NDOT is more fluent with their prices, someone can come in 2022 and get a cost estimate for 6 years, or is it better to just have a flat rate, because they're gonna go with the lower dollar amount regardless, so having those options, I'm just kind of curious why they're there. And I guess the 10% is kind of the industry rate, is what I was hearing that Lisa provided us with feedback.
I think a lot of people want to respond, so I think Dave, then Margaret, then Julie, then Tammy. So Dave, did you have something?
No, I
to
was,
add?
I was just gonna say,
Okay.
when you're talking about reductions, we can require that they justify the reduction amount with an engineer's estimate that we can check. So the engineer would have to say, hey, the amount remaining after this reduction is sufficient to finish up the project.
That was the low one.
I have nothing to say, so Julie, I thought you.
Julie, do you have something?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking that if you look at that chart, at that Excel chart you made, that if NDOT came back in year 3 and said, you're 3 years in, and they say, oh, our estimate's, 5% instead of 10%, that's 1 year. And so if they're continuing the bond, that's where this change in the NDOT number comes in. I would assume that that's on the continuation, not on the primary bond. Does that make sense?
Yes, so it wouldn't be to the starting amount, it would be to the year that it's asking for the 1 year renewal.
Yeah, it's only when they ask for renewal that
Which is
that NDOT number matters, and it's only for that year. Yeah.
And I'm learning a lot in
Which
this
will-
discussion, so, if I'm asking questions that seem pretty simple, they're not simple for me.
None of it is simple. This will be an important section, I think, for all the performance guarantees that we have that are going to be rolling into this new ordinance. So I think we still have to figure out how some of these 2005 projects will be able to renew 1 year, and how staff is going to be able to take all of that on at once to make sure that all these get the updated renewal costs. Because it may have an unintended consequence of a lot of them walking away at that lower number and saying, oh, I'm done here, I'm not gonna renew if it means I have to put up more money.
Yeah, but this is all because they are walking away. And so, if they hadn't already walked away on so many projects, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So if they're gonna walk, I wanna know their names, and I wanna know why they walked, and, before they come before us again, I wanna know that they are, again, applying for another, approval, when they didn't complete X number of, proposals and projects in the past. I'm sorry.
Like a subdivision credit rating.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a fantastic idea to get
Yeah.
a sense on that.
So,
One thing I would be very curious, since 40% seems pretty high, I wonder where like. If there's a certain like backdate to where like that percentage was really kind of. You know, where does that backdate to? What, like, I mean, in the last 5 years, is it 40%? In the last 10 years, is it 40%? But if we look at the last 20 years, do we get to the 40%? So I'm kind of curious in the last 10 years, what would that number look like? So we're really addressing kind of what is occurring more relatively today, not saying that it doesn't matter that we have a 40% increase. That's just a ridiculous high number. So I'm kind of curious. Yeah, pretty much. Just so we can kind of see how well people are finishing their projects over the last 10 years versus everything that we still have on the books, which I don't know how far that would even date back the earliest.
So to clarify, John, I think maybe you started with one question and ended with another. So you're asking staff to look at a history of previously posted performance guarantees and then looking at today's pricing and seeing if that 10% per year matches?
No.
Or are you asking us to look at projects that haven't been completed?
Projects that have been completed like
Okay.
in like 5-year increments, because if we lump them all this together, it's like we have a pretty high walk away, and I'm curious how well these developers are getting to completion in the last 5 years compared to everything.
And the different ways the system is being kind of manipulated, like maybe, they've got a 5-year project and it takes them 10 years, and they slap on the apartments at the end, and where they're back before us with what appears to be a new project, but really is an old project, we just need those nuances too, because, the system is, it occurs to me. And in all of my work and in all of the things that I'm seeing around here, that the system is being gamed. And I'd like to stop the damn games. I'd just like to stop the games. I'd like the people who start the project to finish them. I'd like the people who buy a house to get what they wanted. I'd like the builder to do a good job. And I don't want to be blamed because we're adding regulations because they don't do their work.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. So we have thought as staff of maybe putting in an application fee to every time that you do want to renew a bond, and maybe that will then incentivize them to maybe completely say, it will take us 3 years, not, let's just do it 1 year
That's right.
and then renew a year and renew every year, which is staff. It's labor intensive to do
Yes.
that. I also thought that maybe, now that we're bringing you all the reductions and the, requests for them to like fully like cash out their bonds, do we want another extra step where we bring it to plan commission, where plan commission approves how many years that project is gonna take, kind of look at the estimate ahead of time before giving the green light to, I don't know, allow for the final plating? So it's like, we have the final plat, the SIA, the letter of credit, also at that time, is that when we wanna say, look at that developer in the eye, like, is it gonna take you really 1 year to do all of this? Or maybe you should be doing it for 4 years, like, and I don't know if that's something that we wanna write in as like an extra step, like almost reviewing the final plat.
I definitely wouldn't have the level of expertise to entertain those types of questions, especially understanding the developer's position with their available capital and other operational costs, and also just other projects that they might be moving forward. So question I would rely on the developer. I do think the application might be a great idea, but I would be very hesitant to say, no, you can't do that in a year. It's gonna take you 3 years if they're saying they can do it in a year, just from the level of uncertainty and not really being a developer myself. You have any questions or thoughts on that, Bernie?
No, I look at this and I think that a big portion of what we're trying to solve here is gonna be taken care of by planning staff, and this is not anything against the highway department, but planning staff taking the role of monitoring when these expire. The 4-month period that they've gotta have things in place 4 months in advance, and then a month in advance, instead of racing down to the courthouse on the last day, or the bank on the last day, trying to collect, that's not productive for anybody. I talked to Ben Ayers about that. He shed some light on me a couple weeks ago, on what some of the things that he's gone through in the past, right? There are bad developers out there. There are bad planners out there. There are bad deputies out there. There are bad surveyors and engineers. Just like Julie said, they're out there, right? So do we try to make these things bulletproof for the very, very bad? Or do we look at what the goals are to try to assimilate what we can solve that is even slightly unlikely to happen? So with these provisions of having these things checked out, monitored, the letters go out in advance of when they're gonna expire, I think that's gonna solve a lot of problems. If we extract in the letters of credit a fee amount that exceeds what's practical, then that's gonna take away from funding that the development community, however big or small, what they're gonna be able to have available to actually put the pipe in the ground or put the asphalt on the ground. So there's a balance there. And I understand where Margaret's coming from on this. We've gotta be able to harness the bad players. And I think these timelines that we're introducing into this ordinance are gonna be a big part on solving it. And, you know, when John Carlson did this years ago, and Toby did this years ago, and Ben did this years ago, and Bill did it all before then, we've come a long way. And I'm hoping this change will make a big difference, even going from a bond versus cashier's check or even letter of credit is huge. Because then you don't have to fight the insurance company to collect, right? So I mean, I think we're moving in the right direction, but I don't think we look at, I get the sense that we're looking at, and maybe I'm mistaken, that we're looking at put as much money up front as we can as almost a preemptive punishment for, it's not gonna solve anybody's problem.
Right, and my sympathy with it is over. My sympathy with it is over. You know, once they get more compliant, then we can start having more reasonable reductions and restrictions, but my sympathy for the poor builder is over.
And that's why I was kind of curious of, instead of a full on percentage of who walked away from the beginning to where we're at now, what it looks like, kind of, you know, like a 5-year increment to see if the issue is as big. Because if it's only like a 10% walk away, then that gives us more tangible information. And I guess to Bernie's point, I really kind of lean towards what he was saying because of Jim Stainbrook. He mentioned this once and it's never left my thought process ever, is we can't make it harder for the people that want to follow the rules and do a good job. Where it basically prevents them from doing it, or it becomes too costly, because the people that are gonna break the rules are still gonna break the rules, so we have to make sure that we're doing this in a manner where the people that are doing a good job, it doesn't create another onerous burden on them, because we're trying to find the bad players, because they're gonna remain cutting corners if there already are, in my opinion.
Right, but they can come up with creative ways to manage within their own domain, their guild, their engineering society, their home builders association. If this is a big hassle for them, they get together in a room and say, John, I know you didn't finish that project and now I've got to pay more. You know, Bill, I know you didn't do your due diligence on that project and now look at us. We all have to pay 10% more. I don't want to do business with you. And by the way, we as a group can set aside some funds for the people we trust to finish the damn thing.
I absolutely agree that we have to do our absolute best to make sure that we do address the issue as well. It's just.
But my
I try to
sympathy is
weigh
all
those two things,
40%, that my sympathy
making
is all.
sure we have a path forward that people can kind of go down, and also putting in measures that help to mitigate or prevent that, but ultimately we can't look at this of just trying to find the rule breakers and address that, because I feel like that's gonna be just a compliance issue or some type of thing that we'll always have to be vigilant of, so. I don't really have too many
Highway
thoughts.
Department, these numbers meet the highway department's recommendation. Jackie,
in correspondence that we had with Lisa, mainly it was the 10% per year is what they factor in for their federal grants, and this is in line with that. But we can ask again.
yeah,
make
you
sure.
asked her. That's
Okay.
That's fine.
And maybe
Yeah, you asked.
covering more recent inflation issues that
Yeah.
have been going up very
Okay.
fast recently.
Okay.
Julie, did you have something you wanted to add? No.
Was there anything else that you wanted to bring to our attention?
Uh,
I mean, in
That's
all
a good
sincerity,
point
this
right
is a
there,
very
Jackie.
important
So,
conversation, so.
go into, under 858-4 government, well, sorry, that's. We have been thinking about getting rid of the letter of credit and just using cashier's check. And one thing I went down a rabbit hole today after talking with Ben and the treasurer's office, this is a follow-up to Cheryl Munson asked if we make money on this money. If it's a cashier's check, they will either hold it if it's a temporary, like short stay, but otherwise they do cash it, becomes a line item in the budget. And they do like actively invest and try to make our money work for
That
us.
was my question.
Yeah, so I did just find that out today from the
Uh-huh.
treasurer's office and,
And the way it's.
so.
we do invest it if it's a cashier's check, but we cannot do anything with it if it's a letter.
And the letter of credit has to be like constantly renewed.
But how long do cashier's checks, last?
Well, if they go for 3 years,
Yeah, if
or,
you,
like-
if you're gonna cash that though and hold their money, I don't know if we can hold the interest on that.
well, it's kind of like a fluid,
I don't
the
think,
way that they were explaining it to me today on the phone was that it's kind of a fluid account.
Yeah,
And that if they want that money back, like, there's gonna be money there to
yeah.
cover it. But the bulk of that is, how many?
We do that at the water board. We have renewing CDs at various times of the year and we renew them at different rates according, we don't try to make a huge amount of money on it, but we try to just do what is at the market rate. And then we do have interest that we're able to reinvest in the account. And that can help cover some of the other losses, you know, as long as the board and the people who are responsible approve it. You know, they hear what that is and the budget and
Mhm.
it can, you know, be used according to vote and, you know, it can also pay for some personnel for the oversight of these things.
quick question. Does any of that interest go back into the line items that are being created when we cash the cashier's check? Because from my understanding, the financial board has decided to consolidate all interest. So the dedicated fund that I oversee all goes back to county general. So those
Yeah.
dollars won't even really play into the aspect of putting him into an investment to help facilitate the improvements on these.
That's okay, as long as
This
the
is true,
county
and that's
general,
what they confirmed, that is, it
Yeah.
all just goes into the general fund, it's not like we get to like pull it right back out, put into a highway project. or something
Right, that's
necessarily.
okay.
It's
as
general,
long as the county council then votes to either give,
It's the treasurer and the commissioners that decide that.
well, as long as the treasurer and the commissioners decide that how that money should be judiciously spent and where it's coming from and whether or not there's an administrative burden on a certain department from having accrued that interest from extra duties, that they'll figure that out.
Well, that interest could pay for personnel, and that's, yeah, exactly.
So going back to the failures, and I was developers
I
and
think he's.
defunct back in the day. So my question is, again, the circumstances are that the letter of credit or the cashier's check or bond, it expires. And then we contact Dorothy Smith developer and say, hey, we noticed that this failed, that this expired, we need you to come in and renew it. And they're gonna say, sorry for your life. It expired and you can't make me come in and stand up for that money anymore. I'm walking. So that would be the first example. Is that fair to say?
Accompanying the money is a signed agreement to say they will finish the improvements. But again, if that agreement also has a timeline that lapses with the letter of credit, then I think we are in difficult situations where both the signed agreement and the monies are lapsed. Yes,
Okay, because the agreement doesn't have a timeline on it. The
the
agreement.
agreement does have a time.
Okay, so that would be the first example, or maybe first two examples. The
Okay.
other example would be that there's still $200,000 worth of improvements that are left to do in the subdivision. And the developer says, I don't have money enough to finish it, or what I've got secured with the county now is less than what that number is. So it's yours. And that would be the second or third example, correct?
Yes.
Are those the two primary scenarios? Are there any other scenarios that I'm missing? Because I think your timelines are the
Yeah.
biggest tool we've got, and then plus
Yeah.
accounting for inflation, I think.
That's right.
I think the second option you reference is the most common, is eventually the amount it's gonna take to finish this is more than I have posted with the county. So why even try? Why even keep going? Yeah, I built out a lot of my lots. I don't care about the few that are left. I'm walking.
Okay.
But then the problem becomes that snow plow, maintenance of the subdivision improvements are all under that private developer, and so we've, I think, not yet, but getting close to experiencing sort of an age out of those developers, that now we're getting calls from people in certain subdivisions that are saying, hey, so-and-so is supposed to be plowing my road. They've been doing it for 20 years, but this year they just stopped.
Mhm.
And because it's been going on, and they've been just renewing their letter of credit at the same rate, and now all of a sudden they're stopping their obligations to keep up with that private maintenance. Now we're getting calls to say, well, why won't the county come plow it? And we have to tell them, well, the developer never finished.
Right.
And then they say, well, we'll make the developer finish, and it's like, well, yeah. This is gonna be our tool to get them to try and finish.
Mhm.
That's the main goal.
Is this what's precipitated a lot of the discussion?
Yes, I think that, the highway department for a long time was taking ownership of maintaining these letters of credit for us and cashier's checks. And, because it was being maintained by the highway department and it's in the planning ordinance, I think that there's just been a lot of disconnect in what is happening, because like I said, in the last day, the last hour, that letter of credit is expiring and people are just switching out one more year to us, and we just need to get a handle on those renewals.
Good catch, good thinking, good planning, good solution, you know.
I just, you know, whenever, I just had one more thing. It sounds like we might be moving from this. Also, I mentioned the city doesn't have a planning commission meeting, so I'll be here as long as you need me tonight
Okay,
or today.
we'll still shoot for 5:30, but
Absolutely.
I do wanna move on to the
I
signs.
wanted to make one final point is, as we're looking on this, I understand it's taking on another, layer. And, I would be very curious to hear planning's thoughts on, is this gonna constitute needing another person or more, hours? Basically, are we building out something that can be administrated by planning? And if it comes to your conclusion that we might need some more support staff to take on this role, then it'd be really nice to know that, parallel with this discussion.
Mhm.
Also, that's when that interest thing could be brought up to the council, because then the council would have a huge say on maybe obligating some of those dollars if it starts compounding interest, if we go that direction with this,
The treasurer
where it could.
and the commissioners.
So there's like a board of finances, that's the commissioners and the treasurers, but then ultimately there's the fiduciary body, which is the council. So if it's gonna pertain to personnel, the council then would be part of that discussion. So it's
Okay,
kind of hitting all the executive
Okay.
branches, if you will. So that's something I would be very curious to know, as this moves along, is if this is going to constitute needing more personnel and planning, so we can plan for that accordingly.
Okay. Very good.
These cashier's checks only would ease things up. If we stick with letters of credit where there is that renewal,
Mhm.
that might add, I think, a more
So we
complexity
might be
to it.
reducing some of
I
the,
do wanna come back maybe with some more hard numbers and think about that question.
okay.
Do you think I think that we still could benefit from another ORC meeting. I hate to delay it any further, but I do think we're changing this so substantially that I think we might still want another set of eyes. Is it okay if we bring this back again to ORC? Okay, all right,
Sounds good.
okay. All right, so then let's move on to the signs discussion. This was brought to a prior ORC meeting to discuss timelines for permit reviews. And after we started digging into the signs ordinance a little bit more, we just keep seeing that there's still reference made to content. And so to make this ordinance completely content neutral, we're recommending some clarity around, what language we should have in here and what language we should not. So again, those track changes, the strike through is what's there right now, and what's being added is in red. So, for instance, we're saying, get rid of things that say encouraging the effective use of signs as a mean of communication within the jurisdictional area. We don't wanna assume that we can't look at the sign's content. So to assume it's a means of communication, like in writing, instead of it being like a painted mural or something aesthetic. We just don't wanna have anything in there that's low hanging fruit, so we've taken out information such as this. Some other changes, go ahead.
Pole signs, did you point out pole signs up there?
Yeah, so in our comprehensive plans, there's always been it's trying to discourage the use of pole signs and billboards. So we do not allow billboards currently in our ordinance, and any billboard that exists in the county has been inventoried as being legal, pre-existing or not. Pole signs on properties, we still allow them, but we think that maybe it's not within the county's vision that we would want to continue having pole signs. In the last change to the sign ordinance, we got rid of some visuals that showed pole signs with how to measure them from the top. If, the road is lower and the ground is higher, and then you can have a pole sign that's 25 feet. Based on that road elevation and that top of sign elevation, you could be having a pretty tall sign. And we can't, I don't think in the new ordinance dictate how it's directed. If it's a pole sign on a property, but it happens to say something that has nothing to do with the site, it'd be considered like an off-premise sign. But we wouldn't know that unless you read the content of the sign, so I think we've just gotten into situations. Sorry, we've gotten into situations where, it's sort of borderline pole sign, borderline billboard. And so to get rid of any ambiguity and also to keep with the aesthetic nature of the county, we're wondering if the plan commission and ORC would be interested in just seeing the only wall signs, monument signs,
Canopy signs.
canopy
like
signs would be
gas.
okay, yes, but
I
no.
agree with that proposal.
Okay,
I do too.
okay,
I'd like lighting on canopy signs to not be glaring.
mhm, lighting standards,
Yeah.
okay.
I think this is a better approach than the city took.
All of our
Which is,
things are better.
Oh, we won't, yeah, there's a 2.5 hour conversation, I'll send you the link. They want to just do away with all of them, so there's like a sunset, I guess, there's a term that they were using, I can't remember, where they all have to go away at a certain time, pre-existing. The county recognizing the pre-existing ones and then moving to not permitting more, I think is a way better way to roll this out, and it's really gonna be more amenable to people to accept, and it's not gonna feel like maybe a taking,
Right.
regardless of if that's what it's considered or not. And, it also secures some of their, income from having a sign on their property if they're being paid for that, so. I like this approach
Okay.
moving forward.
Phasing out
I really
new
don't
pole
have a
signs.
position, except I don't wanna see it look ugly and cluttered, so,
Yeah,
Do we get to say anything about signs on buses coming into the county?
but Pepsi machines.
Yeah. What about,
you're gonna mess with the vending lobbyist association.
I think there's a lot of, creativity on signage, but I do think that the point that I know Dave has made in the past is that some pole signs do serve to offer better better sight distance when you're pulling out of a driveway. You know, if you have a monument sign there, it can be difficult to see beyond the sign if it's directed perpendicular to the road, so having a pole sign may be less obtrusive to the driver or pedestrian that's crossing. So I do wanna take into account that if we get rid of pole signs, we need to still have some sort of language that makes sure that we have that appropriate sight distance.
and I'm not.
Could someone take that to the BZA, for
That's
example?
my question, yeah.
To have a pole sign,
Uh-huh,
We've done pole sign variances. I remember when I first started working here, I did one for that gas station up on Sample Road. And they wanted it bigger. There was like, it was a cluster of four variances so that they could have their bigger sign. And I believe they got it.
so, yeah, I think that we had a use variance for, a billboard, so I would think that it would be a variance request for either pole sign or billboard, I assume.
So my thought is that they're gonna see there's a variance request and they're just gonna go with what they're committed to do. And if it's a line of sight, which is a safety issue, I would way rather put in measures where it's more discretionary at a staff level at the highway department. And somewhere in this where it says for line of sight issues, pole signs may be considered. So people are immediately aware that that's an option and allow the highway department to determine for safety measures only if a pole sign is more adequate than a monument sign. In my opinion, if we put it to the BZA like that, I just feel people are gonna just take the option that's available and not go through the extra measures. And if these are actual safety concerns, we should make it way more discretionary at a staff level and also put some type of wordage on here that highlight that we will consider a pole sign for line of sight and safety purposes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And I
It does.
think that, now, I'm not being facetious. You know, the same is true with the movable signs on city buses that come out to the county. You can't see through the windows. The line of sight for traffic is very difficult. And I wonder, is there anything that we can do for those movable signs on buses that are actually in our transportation ways that inhibit line of sight.
We can't control anything that's not affixed.
It's
To
not in
private
our
property,
jurisdiction 'cause it's on the right of way.
So what's the example?
Like-
A city bus.
like a
That has all
wrap.
its windows blacked out with signs and advertising, and you can't see through the windows to see, the other side of traffic or anything. They're just like a huge obstacle in your line of sight. You can't see around, you can't see through, you can't
That's
see.
for the right of, I
So
think, I mean,
we're
it's right of way.
talking about
It's
vehicles there.
not-
Is that what we're doing?
No, I'm just talking about signs.
Yeah. On this pole sign, if you're trying to get rid of pole signs, you can adopt reasonable time, place and manner restrictions. So I guess the question is, for me, is why is a pole sign unreasonable? If it meets our height and area standards, what does it matter? Cause you can see through them, you can see around them. I always think they're safer than the huge monument sign where you can't see around it. So I don't know, what's wrong with pole signs.
I don't have a position in it at all, except for what I was just saying is if it creates a variance process, I feel like people are just gonna lean towards what they can do, and if it's truly a safety measure, we should really dig through that one and indicate that there is a variance process. But to your point, I don't have a position on that.
What about off-premise pole signs that we can't look at the content for?
Right,
Well-
I think that's the issue, is they become
Well-
like mini billboards.
Well, that's okay under our ordinance. As long as they meet the sign standards, the height, the area and so forth. And I thought those heights and the areas were adjusted so that it wouldn't be attractive for a billboard company.
I don't know, I'll have to look at the height. I think we got rid of the imagery. We said for the sign size,
I think that's
no more than 285 square feet, sorry, my past.
I think in the future, if, a later court ruling comes in and says, content does matter, which I think will eventually happen. When that happens, I think we just come back and look at all of this again, but I think because we can't look at content, it's really difficult to determine, where signs should be and especially the off-premise mini billboards that are possible with our current ordinance.
I guess I was trying to get a feel for the room of the idea of allowing a waiver or whatever appropriate term it is, at staff level at the highway department to permit other types of signs for safety concerns, line of distance concerns.
Is that in this here?
We're talking about it so that like if we're comfortable with it, which I would be absolutely supportive of that, then I think we should add language that identifies it.
I'd have to see it. I don't know if I am in agreement with that.
Okay, well, that's fair enough.
And
I think we need to add the height back in if we're
I
gonna
think
keep
it was
pole signs.
25 feet was,
It was the illustration
But
and
the
then we
illustration
struck
had-
that. Yeah, so if we wanna.
I mean, there needs to be a height limitation in
Yes,
the ordinance.
is that from,
So the definition of monument sign has a height limitation and the wall sign is based on the wall cannot exceed the height of the roof. And we get rid of pole and billboards. I don't know, is there any other signs that? I mean, canopy signs, but canopy would have to meet the height limitation for the zone. So if every sign has to be affixed to another structure. I don't know if that's. We could talk a little bit more about I don't wanna go against the statute for time, place and manner discretion. I know that the comp plan says try to get rid of billboards and pole signs, but I understand the safety thing. And we talked about maybe having some built-in discretion. Tron mentioned having built-in discretion for the highway department to look at a safety measure for pole signs. But yeah, I think that maybe the last edit to the signs change, we got rid of more clarity on the height, so I think we need to add the height back in. If we're keeping pole signs.
Well, what was the answer to Dave's question about pole signs in general? Did you get an answer on that, Dave? Like,
I don't know, I guess my feeling is, what is the harm that they do? If, as opposed to a monument sign,
Mhm.
what's the difference as far as,
Cause you're saying the message on a monument sign could also be off premise.
yeah.
It doesn't have to be on premise.
Yeah, under our ordinance right now, you can have off-premise signs,
Mhm.
as long as they meet those requirements of what, 60 square feet? It's,
I think the main thing that, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, that is achieved through these, ordinances, especially the monument sign, preference, or, the building into this ordinance, the monument sign preference, is designing the overall aesthetic of your community. That pole signs, aren't as, maybe aesthetically pleasing as monument signs. And we've been to communities where they have, primarily monument signs like Carmel, Indiana, et cetera. The question is that a look that we are wanting? And if so, we go toward the monument type sign, and if it isn't a look that we're wanting, and I could be convinced either way, then you are not as restrictive on the pole signs. I mean, part of our character may be pole signs, I don't know, I just don't know. It's just, it seems to me to be designing into the code a preference for a certain aesthetic. Am I wrong?
No, I think it's primarily aesthetic. I don't think there's a safety hazard. But when you say time, place, and manner, Dave will break that down for us. So time being the time that the sign is
yeah, this would be a manner
Okay.
restriction.
a manner restriction as in
Yeah.
the design.
And, aesthetics is a legitimate planning objective, no doubt about that. It's just, I mean, like as Tron says and points out, in a lot of cases, it's safer from a traffic standpoint to have a pole sign rather than a monument sign that blocks more vision.
So we could just be at risk for a lawsuit if we get rid of the pole signs. Is that the major concern?
I don't know if it's a lawsuit, but it could be somebody's life, I mean, or welfare,
It's a
health,
It's a safety concern.
Mhm.
But Drew put something in the comments to. Just, sorry, Dave, and then I guess
Thanks,
to your
Drew.
question. Jackie did state that the comprehensive plan identifies moving away from those things, so that is an answer in a sense.
That's
Yeah.
that's an answer,
Question.
that's an answer
Yeah.
for this, for the context of this meeting for sure, but
Yeah.
I took it that Dave was asking, what's the problem with pole signs regardless of what? Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
What's the problem with pole signs regardless of what the comprehensive plan says? I've always thought that the reason why people don't like pole signs is because individuals that don't like billboards, that's a very close cousin to a billboard.
Right.
Whether somebody could move to that, or it would be difficult to differentiate between a pole sign and a billboard. I don't know, but like I said, I think in the comments, pole signs are much easier to construct. They allow a wider window than a monument sign would. And then, because a monument sign is typically lower, so it can obstruct the field of vision and the view of whatever else you're looking at. Whereas if you got a monument sign or a pole sign, you can probably see much more of the right of way than you can with a bunch of monuments. But I think it's a great question. So that's why.
Yeah. On the comprehensive plan, I would just note that was adopted long before we changed the sign regulations. and long before Gilbert even came out, that Supreme Court case, so, it's, aesthetics are legitimate. It's just, you should think about, what the impact is and what the likelihood of, the billboards are typically, I think 400 square feet. And that's how they make their money,
Yeah.
know? And so, if you reduced it down to 60 or whatever it is, you're just not gonna get, I don't think you're gonna get the billboard companies reducing their signs down there because people don't wanna pay for that.
Right. I
But
think without
Maybe I'm wrong.
without looking at the content, I think getting rid of pole signs to our department feels a little bit easier in that we may not have to get into the dispute of off premise, on premise, because we can't look at it to determine off premise, right? It just is a sign permit that's coming in on a property and it's this type and this large, and we can permit it or we can't. To our office, I think if you're looking at who is the average or who, can't really say like the sign's purpose, but like a pole sign is not directed towards you on the ground as a pedestrian or like along that specific frontage. You wouldn't like in your car look up to see, oh, there's that sign. It's more for a different roadway location, like, I-69, you could see a pole sign from a mile away, or you could see at least it existed from a long way away. So is it that we want a sign ordinance that is keeping with the aesthetics of possibly a pedestrian view or even like on the ground view, or do you want, I know there's gonna be like concerns with sight distance on the ground too.
Even big shopping malls like in Kentucky on the other side of and in Ohio, outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, they've gone to monument signs, and we have to remember, the signs that we see are on our Google Maps, they just take us there. We're not looking up in the air to say, where's a McDonald's? We're not looking for the golden arches anymore to tell us we get off the highway here. We know because our GPS is telling us if there's a McDonald's at this exit, or you've got one of those blue information signs that says there's a McDonald's at this exit. And so I don't know, it could be that we're in a period of transition where the utility of the sign and the information, our reliance on the information that it conveys, it is subsiding. So if we get ahead of the curve in toward the trend of aesthetics, which, I encourage you when you go to Carmel, Indiana, or you go down to Louisville and, just observe it a little bit more closely. You go to Nashville, they have a different ethos and a different approach, Nashville, Indiana. And I think this is an important decision about the look of our community. If we want to look more like IU, we go toward the monument sign. And if we want to look less like IU, we go more toward the pole sign. And I'm amoral about it, but I think these are important aspects of the discussion,
Okay.
Does that give enough to planning to go off of anything?
Yeah, I think that I wanna make sure that, maybe we could build in or have a larger discussion about the safety feature of the pole sign and maybe some built-in setbacks for monument signs that may be a problem. If the goal of the ordinance is to drive people towards a certain type of sign look, then we could do that. If the goal of the ordinance is to make sure that we're only regulating exactly what we're allowed and aesthetics can't be a primary goal, then I think we need to go a different direction. Because if our setbacks are too restrictive to even say a monument sign makes sense for anyone, and let's say, most people are gonna only be able to be left with the option of a canopy sign if they have a canopy or a wall sign. I don't know if that puts us in any kind of situation that we don't want to be in legally, so we could check with legal and get back to you all. The last item on the agenda, we also have some images here to discuss, but you know, if we're gonna get rid of pole signs, then we probably need to get rid of some of these visuals. The last item that we were hoping to discuss was in regards to the discussion that we had at a prior ORC meeting about the 160, let's see, since September 2023, we've had, I think it's about 165 requests for zoning changes, or at least an update of what how they voted their zoning. So there was a discussion at the ORC to add in like an up zone or down zone image. And then maybe like we are trying to ascertain based on the recorded discussion, what there might be a movement towards. The planning staff's recommendation is going to be in line with the comprehensive plan, but we wanted to give some discussion for if the ORC, or if you would decide to send this to the plan commission, if you would like to move that more towards a different allowance than what the comprehensive plan would support and what the ultimately, what the CDO map says. We, like I said, we have over 165 of these, so I think that you can do it one of two ways. You can look at these and see all the ones that people are dissatisfied about and just hold on to that until we get to the public hearings and let those people come speak at that moment to see if they can persuade you to change it. Or we can start knocking these out now and at least responding to those people now to say this is what the ORC discussion was. Here's the recording. You had a chance to come speak at the CDO listening session. You had a chance to fill out the survey. Here's the summary of this, and you're welcome to come to the next engagement session or the public hearing. You will be notified. That might save you time later, but we just want to make sure that we're, you know, people have submitted information to say they do or don't like their zoning, and we're trying to parse that out and disseminate that to see if changes need to be made to the map. And so staff is asking for some guidance from you all on that.
I think we should do a special meeting, a different meeting, but I think the ORC should provide some comments on each one of these that will then go to the plan commission. In other words, we could make a recommendation. We agree, we don't agree, here's why, etc. And just as staff makes recommendations on every petition, I think staff should make a recommendation if they don't agree with the ORC. They should make their recommendation known to the plan commission. But I think when we get to the next step, I think it would be useful to have those recommendations on hand. It doesn't mean we've decided anything, but we certainly can give our input to the plan commission.
So like one ORC meeting where this is the only topic we address and just try and tackle it as if we have it presented here, or is there information missing?
That's a pretty good chart.
Okay.
You did a great job.
I love this chart, and I think this in a map, if we have time to look at it, you know, if you give us a couple weeks to work through it on our own, you know, we could, I think we could get through. And I think if you, as they're presented to us, I think they grouped as well. So that, you know, like when we talked about this area, we grouped them, and I think that helps rather than just listing every single address, just in order of numerical or street name or whatever. If there's a region or an area, block those together, and that'll help us, I think, develop a clearer recommendation.
Okay.
Good job, though, in presenting this. It really distilled a lot of complex information for us and reminded us of discussions. I really appreciated the work you put in here and the maps.
Yeah, this chart is easy to understand, and it contains so much information.
Yeah.
Okay, so another ORC meeting though to kind of fill out that last block of ORC discussion. That last column is gonna be what you send to the plan commission then for all of these as a recommendation. So you would go through each one and decide, okay.
Right, that way that, folks, like, let's say somebody, said, oh, I think this should be 2 acres, not 3.
Mhm.
We agree and staff agrees, they don't have to come running back for every single public hearing because now they know, look, there's 2 different recommendations to change this and we agree with you. You can
Okay.
come to public hearings, but you don't have to. And so kind of, these folks have already taken the time to provide this information. I don't want them to feel like they're obligated to come to every single public hearing we have for something like an acre,
Sure. Since I probably can't promise that we'll never have a empty ORC agenda in the future, could I give some homework and just have each person maybe, if I can print this out for anyone that wants a printout and just make some notes to have some
I can
thoughts
print
on,
out,
okay,
I'll get it back to you, that,
or what
you
you would
did
like to
great job on
do
that.
on that. Okay, just so that if we have it as like a 20-minute or half-hour discussion at the next meeting, we can maybe knock it out and then you
Sure.
can have some thoughts prepared. Okay.
Well, I'm in no rush. Just simply to state that we're looking at some pretty significant changes, that's gonna have profound impact moving forward, and I think as much as time needed is a better idea than trying to get this moved too quickly. Couple thoughts I was having is I would really like to know staff's recommendation before I start paring into this, because you might have some very good content to provide us from your recommendation that I might not be thinking of at all.
Isn't staff's recommendation already up the second column?
Yes,
It's already up there.
That's
Okay.
what the consultants and staff have come up with the proposed zoning based on what the comprehensive plan is sitting at now. So
Well,
they-
with it sitting now, so I guess, are you looking to have a different
Or the
recommendation
CEO, or
than
the
what's
CEO.
already there?
no,
That's why we need your help.
Well, that's kind of that from what I was hearing Commissioner Thomas says is that they give us another recommendation of where they are on these things as well, so I guess
If in response to the, let's say the ORC wishes to change. I'll go for the first one, 848 West That Road from medium density 0.21 acres to 0.67 acres. You want us to respond to that change for 0.67 acres?
it would be helpful because you're
Okay.
looking at things in different ways than I am, and you might have some very significant points or, to add to this that could weigh on my decision quite significantly.
I think the key is, along what you're thinking, the key is in that second column, what staff is recommending already.
Right,
Okay.
but they're asking if we
For us-
should, if they should reevaluate their recommendation in going somewhat outside of the parameters of the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So if we're recommending 0.21 acres and the existing is 1 acre and you decide 0.67 over the 1 acre, I mean, you could ascertain that staff is recommending 0.21. So if you're between 0.21 and 1 acre and you choose 0.67, I mean, you have to weigh the pros and cons of either sticking at 1 acre or 0.67 if 0.21 isn't feasible, so.
So, yeah, I guess it's kind of could go either way. It
So that's
seems
why
like
it would be good to just have some notes prepared ahead of time so that we can keep the discussion moving.
the other parts is we have had a lot of feedback, right? And are we being asked just to look at these and not all of the other areas of the county that have?
We haven't been able to move past this one. There's multiple more that will be created.
Right, okay, so that's a good one. And then I guess this is all the people that submitted things through the online map.
Or have called in and we
Or have called,
digitized, or
or
that
have
came to the
spoke.
CDO.
So we even have like the people that have spoke that.
Yep.
Okay, and we're gonna try to look at. I like the idea of grouping them together, but we're gonna try to look at all of these areas, because I guess I'll just cut to the chase. What I'm seeing right now is primarily, Clear Creek and primarily the people that always come and speak to these. With some of this, but what I'm very curious is about kind of some of the discussion, from the, I'm gonna say it wrong, from some of the folks that were talking about what kind of creating more of a business zone overlay in certain areas. And I'm not saying that that's something we should do, but I want to make sure that we'll be discussing what they had to provide during the listen session as well.
Those, yes, so those ones, I mean, we can reflect on that as like a parcel specific comment. We have some of those, yes.
Right,
So
so
we can have that.
I still want to have that discussion regardless if we have a special meeting or if we talk about that here, but I just want to make sure we're doing more of a comprehensive overview of the feedback and not just looking at isolated areas that have gained a lot of traction, if
Okay.
you will. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And I know that some of this will have a difference of opinion and such, so maybe if planning could identify things that they think could be helpful of which way they would, sway if we were looking a little outside of the context of the comprehensive plan. And I think that could really help me because, I really look towards you guys for your expertise, so.
Okay. All right, thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
For me to sign.
Actually, I don't think we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You like it.
They've been looking at me.